King Vorthak stood at the massive window of his flagship, staring into the dark void of space where the planet Kepler 442b used to shine. Now only scattered debris floated in the emptiness, pieces of metal and rock that caught the light of distant stars. His golden eyes, usually bright with the confidence of absolute power, were dim with grief that had been eating at him for 3 months. The Zilani Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Their ships were faster than anything else in space, their weapons could melt through the strongest armor, and their warriors were trained from birth to be perfect soldiers. Vorthak had expanded the empire to include 47 star systems, and no enemy had ever posed a real threat to his people. The humans were supposed to be just another weak species to be conquered and forgotten, but the humans had surprised everyone. When the Zilani fleet arrived at their little colony on Kepler 442b, the humans did not surrender like most species did. They did not even try to negotiate. Instead, they fought with a madness that made no sense to the Zilani commanders. They used crude weapons that should not have worked against advanced Zilani technology, but somehow they did work. They hid in caves and struck without warning, then disappeared before the Zilani could respond. They turned their own mining equipment into bombs and used their knowledge of the planet to set traps that destroyed entire Zilani squads. Princess Zara had begged her father to let her lead the final assault. She was his only child, the heir to the throne, and she had trained her whole life to be a warrior. At 25 years old, she was already one of the best pilots in the Zilani fleet. Her ship, the Golden Talon, was equipped with the newest weapons and the strongest shields. Vorthak had been proud to watch her fly into battle, certain that she would crush the human resistance and bring honor to their family name. The battle lasted 6 hours. The humans fought from every building, every tunnel, every piece of cover they could find. They used weapons that fired metal bullets instead of energy, weapons that seemed primitive but somehow punched through Zilani armor like it was made of paper. They had explosives that could bring down entire structures, and they did not hesitate to use them even when it meant destroying their own homes. Most shocking of all, they fought to the death. Not a single human tried to surrender, even when defeat was certain. When the smoke cleared, the human colony was gone. The buildings were rubble, the tunnels were collapsed, and every human defender was dead, but the cost had been terrible. Half the Zilani fleet was destroyed, and among the wreckage floating in space was the Golden Talon. Princess Zara's ship had been torn apart by a human explosive device, and the emergency beacon had gone silent. Search teams found pieces of the ship scattered across several kilometers, but no escape pods and no survivors. Vorthak had not slept properly since that day. He ate little and spoke only when necessary. His advisors watched him with growing concern, as he spent hours staring out at the stars, lost in memories of his daughter. General Korath, his oldest friend and most trusted military commander, had tried to convince him that Princess Zara died a hero's death, that her sacrifice had meaning because it showed the galaxy that the Zilani Empire could not be defeated. But Vorthak found no comfort in these words. His daughter was gone, and the humans had taken her from him. The grief slowly changed into something else. Anger began to burn in Vorthak's chest, growing stronger each day until it became a rage that consumed his thoughts. The humans had not just killed his soldiers or destroyed his ships. They had murdered his child, the future of his bloodline, the one person in the galaxy he loved more than his own life. This could not go unpunished. This would not go unpunished. 3 days after the battle, Vorthak called a meeting of his war council. The great hall of his flagship was filled with his most senior officers, all of them wearing the purple and gold uniforms of the Zilani military. Their faces were grim as they listened to their king speak in a voice that was cold and deadly. "The humans have shown us their true nature," Vorthak said, his hands clenched into fists. "They are not just another species to be conquered. They are a disease that must be cut out before it spreads. They killed my daughter, and they will pay for this crime with their extinction." General Korath stepped forward. He was an old warrior, with scars on his face and hands that told the story of a lifetime of battles. "My king, I understand your pain. Princess Zara was like a daughter to me as well. But we must be careful not to let emotion cloud our judgment. The humans are spread across dozens of star systems. A war of extermination would take years and cost millions of lives. Then we will take years and spend millions of lives, Vorthek replied. I do not care about the cost. I want every human world burned to ash. I want their cities destroyed, their ships scattered, their colonies wiped from existence. I want their name forgotten from history. Admiral Nexus, the commander of the Zilani fleet, cleared his throat. My king, if we mobilize the entire fleet for this campaign, we will leave our core worlds vulnerable to attack from other enemies. The Kithan Federation has been building their military, and the Astral Collective has been expanding their territory. If we commit everything to fighting the humans, we might face threats from multiple directions. Vorthek's golden eyes blazed with fury. Let them come. The Zilani Empire has defeated every enemy we have faced for 2,000 years. We will destroy the humans first, then we will destroy anyone else who dares to challenge us. My daughter's death will be avenged, and the galaxy will remember what happens to those who defy the throne. The meeting continued for hours as the officers planned their campaign of destruction. They would start with the outer human colonies, the small settlements that had little defense. They would use their fastest ships to strike quickly and without warning, leaving no survivors to spread word of the attack. Then they would move inward, system by system, until they reached the human homeworlds. It would be a war unlike any the galaxy had seen, a war of total annihilation, but as the officers discussed tactics and logistics, none of them noticed the small ship that had appeared at the edge of their sensor range. The vessel was unlike anything in the Zilani database, with a hull that seemed to be made from parts of different technologies welded together. It moved slowly through space, as if its pilot was being very careful not to attract attention. Inside the ship, a figure in modified Zilani armor sat at the controls, watching the massive Zilani fleet through the viewscreen. The armor was scratched and dented, and strange additions had been made to it, devices that looked like they came from human technology. The pilot's face was hidden behind a helmet, but her breathing was steady and calm despite the danger of being so close to the enemy fleet. She had been traveling for weeks to reach this place, and she knew that what she was about to do would change everything. Her father was down there on that flagship, planning a war that would destroy two species and accomplish nothing. She had to stop him, but first she had to find the courage to face him again. She had to find the words to explain what had happened to her and why she was no longer the same person who had flown into battle 3 months ago. The pilot reached up and removed her helmet, revealing the face of Princess Zara. She was alive, but she was changed. Her golden eyes held a wisdom that had not been there before, and her expression was that of someone who had seen the true cost of war. She looked at the Zilani fleet one more time, then began to power up her communications. Array, it was time to go home. The alarm bells on the Zilani flagship began to ring just as King Vorthek was reviewing the final plans for his war against humanity. The sound cut through the quiet of the command center like a blade, and every officer on the bridge immediately turned to their stations. Admiral Nexus was the first to speak, his voice tight with confusion. My king, we have an unidentified vessel approaching from the outer system. It appears to be requesting permission to dock. Vorthek's eyes narrowed. No ship should have been able to approach his fleet without being detected much earlier. The Zilani had sensors that could spot enemy vessels from millions of kilometers away, and their defensive systems were always active. For something to get this close meant either their technology was failing or the approaching ship had capabilities. They did not understand. Show me, Vorthek commanded. The main viewscreen flickered to life, displaying an image that made every person on the bridge fall silent. The ship floating in space before them was unlike anything in the Zilani military database. Its hull seemed to be made from pieces of different technologies welded together in a way that should not have worked but somehow did. Parts of it looked like standard Zilani construction, with the smooth curves and golden metal that marked all their vessels. But other sections were clearly human in design, with rough edges and exposed components that looked primitive but functional. Strangest of all were the modifications that seemed to belong to neither species. Additions that pulsed with an energy that made the sensors struggle to get clear readings. "What is that thing?" General Korath asked, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. Before anyone could answer, the communication system crackled to life. The voice that came through the speakers was one that King Vorthek had not heard in 3 months, a voice he had been certain he would never hear again. "Father, this is Princess Zara. I request permission to dock." The bridge fell into a silence so complete that the only sound was the hum of the ship's engines. King Vorthek felt his heart stop beating for a moment, then start again with a rhythm that seemed too fast and too loud. His daughter's voice was exactly as he remembered it, but there was something different about her tone. She sounded older somehow, more tired, as if she had seen things that had aged her beyond her years. "Impossible," General Korath whispered. "We saw her ship destroyed. We searched the debris field for days." Admiral Nexus was already running scans on the approaching vessel. "My king, the voice patterns match Princess Zara's exactly. But the ship she is flying is not in our database. I cannot identify its origin or capabilities." Vorthak's mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. His daughter was alive, but how was that possible? Her ship had been torn apart by human explosives, and the emergency beacon had gone silent. The search teams had found pieces of the Golden Talon scattered across space, but no escape pods and no survivors. Even if she had somehow survived the destruction of her ship, how had she obtained this strange vessel? And why had she been silent for 3 months? "It could be a human trick," General Korath said quietly. "They might have captured Princess Zara and are using her voice to deceive us. Or they might have found a way to replicate her speech patterns." The possibility sent a chill through Vorthek's chest. The humans had already proven they were capable of tactics that the Zilani had never encountered. If they had somehow taken his daughter prisoner and were now using her to get close to his fleet, the implications were terrifying. But if there was even a chance that Zara was truly alive, he had to know. "Open the channel," Vorthek ordered. The communication system activated, and his voice echoed through space toward the strange ship. "If you are truly my daughter, prove it. Tell me something only she would know." There was a pause, and then "Princess." Zara's voice came through again, softer now and filled with an emotion that made Vorthak's chest tighten. "When I was 8 years old, I broke the crystal vase in your private chambers while playing with my training sword. You told everyone it was an accident, but you made me promise never to lie to you again. I kept that promise for 17 years, Father. I am keeping it now." The memory hit Vorthak like a physical blow. He remembered that day perfectly. The way his young daughter had stood in the wreckage of his favorite decoration with tears in her golden eyes. He had been angry at first, but her honest confession had melted his heart. It was a memory he had never shared with anyone, not even his closest advisors. "Grant her docking permission," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My king, General." Korath protested. "We should at least scan the ship for weapons or explosives." "If this is a human trap," "I said grant her permission," Vorthek repeated, his voice growing stronger. "But have security teams standing by. If there is any sign of deception, they are to act immediately." The docking bay was cleared of all non-essential personnel, and the king's best warriors took positions around the landing platform. Vorthek himself stood at the center of the bay, flanked by General Korath and Admiral Nexus. His heart pounded as he watched the strange ship settle onto the deck with a hiss of cooling engines. The ship's airlock opened with a sound that was part Zilani technology and part something else entirely. A figure stepped out, and Vorthak felt his breath catch in his throat. It was Princess Zara, but she was not the same person who had flown into battle 3 months ago. Her armor was still recognizably Zilani, but it had been modified with human technology and strange additions that he did not recognize. Her golden hair was longer than she usually wore it, and her eyes held a depth that spoke of experiences he could not imagine, but what shocked him most was the figure that stepped out behind her. It was a human male, wearing armor that seemed to be made from the same combination of technologies as the ship itself. He was tall and lean, with scars on his face that told the story of many battles. His hair was dark and cut short in the human, military style, and his eyes were a blue color that Vorthak had never seen before. Most disturbing of all, he carried weapons that appeared to be a fusion of Zilani and human design, devices that pulsed with the same strange energy as the ship's. Unknown modifications. Princess Zara walked toward her father with steady steps, but she stopped just out of reach. The human followed close behind her, his hand resting on his weapon but his posture non-threatening. For a moment, father and daughter simply stared at each other across the space that separated them. "Hello, father," Princess Zara said. "I know. You have questions. I know this is difficult to understand. But I need you to listen to what I have to say, because the war you are planning will destroy everything we have built." Vorthak's emotions warred within him. Joy at seeing his daughter alive battled with fury at her apparent collaboration with the enemy. Confusion about her strange appearance mixed with fear of what her presence might mean. But above all, he felt a desperate need to understand what had happened to her and why she had returned with a human at her side. "Explain yourself," he said, his voice carrying all the authority of his position. "Explain why my daughter, the heir to the Zilani throne, stands before me with our enemy." Princess Zara's expression remained calm, but her eyes flickered with an emotion that might have been pain. "Because, father, I have learned that not everything we believed about our enemies was true. And I have learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from conquest but from understanding." The human beside her shifted slightly, and Vorthak noticed that his eyes never stopped moving, constantly scanning the room for threats. This was a warrior, someone who had survived battles that most people would not have lived through. But there was something else in his expression, something that looked almost like protectiveness when he glanced at Princess Zara. "Who are you?" Vorthak demanded, addressing the human directly. The human met his gaze without flinching. "My name is Danny Walsh, Your Majesty. I am a soldier in the human resistance, and I am the one who saved your daughter's life." King Vorthak's golden eyes blazed with fury as he stared at the human who claimed to have saved his daughter's life. Every instinct he had developed over decades of ruling told him that this was impossible. Humans were the enemy, the species that had killed thousands of his people and destroyed his daughter's ship. They were not saviors, but destroyers, and the idea that one of them could have helped Princess Zara was almost too much for his mind to accept. "You lie," he said, his voice echoing through the docking bay. "Your people are responsible for her death. I saw the wreckage of her ship with my own eyes." Danny Walsh did not flinch under the king's angry gaze. Instead, he reached slowly into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a piece of twisted metal that gleamed with golden light. Vorthak recognized it immediately as a fragment from the Golden Talon, the ship his daughter had been flying when she disappeared. The metal was scorched and bent, but there was no mistaking its origin. "I found this in the wreckage 3 months ago," Danny said, his voice steady despite the weapons pointed at him. "Along with your daughter, who was barely alive in what was left of her escape pod? The pod's beacon was damaged, which is why your search teams never found her." Princess Zara stepped forward, and Vorthak could see the truth in her eyes. "He is telling the truth, father. My ship was destroyed, but I managed to reach an escape pod just before the explosion. The pod crashed on the planet's surface, and I was trapped inside with my life support failing. Danny found me and pulled me to safety." The king's mind struggled to process this information. His daughter had been saved by a human, one of the very people he had sworn to destroy. It went against everything he believed about their nature, everything he had been taught about their weakness and brutality. But as he looked at Princess Zara, he could see that she was different now. There was a strength in her bearing that had not been there before, but also a sadness that spoke of experiences that had changed her forever. "Even if what you say is true," Vorthak said slowly, "it does not change what your people did. They killed thousands of my warriors. They destroyed my ships. They turned my daughter against me." "I have not been turned against you," Princess Zara said firmly. I am still your daughter, and I still love you. But I have learned things during these past 3 months that you need to understand. The humans are not what we thought they were, and this war you are planning will destroy both our species." General Chorus stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "My king, we should not listen to this. The princess has obviously been corrupted by human propaganda. We should place her in protective custody and execute this human immediately." "No," Vorthak said, raising his hand to stop his general. "I will hear what she has to say, but make no mistake, human. If I detect any deception, any attempt to manipulate my daughter or threaten my people, you will die slowly and painfully." Danny nodded, accepting the threat without fear. "I understand, Your Majesty. But I hope you will listen with an open mind to what we have discovered." Princess Zara looked at her father with eyes that held a mixture of love and desperation. "After Danny saved me, I was too injured to travel for several weeks. I had to stay with the human resistance fighters, and I learned about their lives and their struggles. They are not the mindless savages we were told they were, Father. They are people just like us, with families and dreams and hopes for the future." "They are still our enemies," Vorthak said coldly. "They killed your friends and fellow warriors." "Yes, they did," Princess Zara agreed. "Just as we killed their friends and family members. But do you know why they fought so hard? Do you know why they refused to surrender even when defeat was certain?" Vorthak did not answer, but his eyes demanded an explanation. "They were not just fighting for territory or resources," Princess Zara continued. "They were fighting to protect something far more important. Something that threatens both our species if we do not work together to stop it." Danny reached into another pouch and carefully pulled out an object that made everyone in the docking bay take a step backward. It was about the size of a human hand, made of what looked like living metal that shifted and pulsed with a dark energy. The surface was covered in symbols that seemed to move when looked at directly, and the air around it felt cold and wrong. "This is a Devourer artifact," Danny said, his voice grim. "The humans found several of these on Kepler 442b, buried deep in the planet's core. They have been studying them for decades, trying to understand what they are and where they came from." Admiral Nexus stepped closer to examine the object, but stopped when the artifact pulsed with a brighter light. "I have never seen anything like this." "What is it?" "It is a weapon," Princess Zara said. "Or rather, it is part of a weapon system created by an ancient race called the Devourers. They ruled the galaxy long before either of our species evolved, and they consumed entire worlds to feed their hunger for energy. They disappeared suddenly, leaving behind only scattered artifacts like this one." Vorthak felt a chill run down his spine. The object in Danny's hands radiated a malevolent energy that made his skin crawl. "Why should I believe this story? How do I know this is not some human trick?" "Because," Danny said, "the Devourers are waking up. The humans have been monitoring energy signatures from the edge of the galaxy for the past 50 years. The signals have been getting stronger, and our scientists believe that the Devourers are returning." Princess Zara nodded, her expression grave. "The humans were not fighting us because they hated the Zilani Empire. They were fighting to keep these artifacts out of our hands because they knew we would not understand the danger they represent. They have been preparing for the Devourers' return for generations, developing weapons and tactics specifically designed to fight them. That is why their technology seems so strange to us," Danny added. "It was not designed to fight other biological species. It was designed to fight machines that can absorb and redirect energy. Their crude ballistic weapons, their explosive devices, their unusual tactics, all of it was developed to counter Devourer technology." Vorthak stared at the artifact, his mind racing. If what they were saying was true, then his entire understanding of the war had been wrong. The humans had not been fighting out of hatred or greed, but out of fear of something far worse than either of their species. And now, by planning to destroy humanity, he might be eliminating the galaxy's best hope of survival. "Prove it," he said finally. "If the Devourers are truly returning, show me evidence." Danny and Princess Zara exchanged glances, and she nodded. "We can do better than that, Father. We can show you one of their scout ships." The king's blood ran cold. They are already here? A small advance force arrived in the outer system yesterday, Princess Zara said. They have been testing our defenses, learning about our capabilities. Danny and I engaged one of their ships on our way here, and we barely escaped with our lives. As if summoned by her words, the ship's alarm system began to wail. Admiral Nexus rushed to a nearby communication panel and activated it with shaking hands. The voice that came through was filled with panic. Admiral, we have multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. They are not responding to our hails, and their energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. They appear to be accelerating toward the fleet. Vorthak felt the world spinning around him. In the space of a few minutes, his entire reality had been turned upside down. His daughter was alive, but she had been living with the enemy. The enemy was not what he had believed them to be, and now there was a new threat approaching that made their previous conflicts seem insignificant. How many ships? He asked. 3 contacts, my king. They are still several hours away, but they are moving at incredible speed. Princess Zara gripped her father's arm, her eyes pleading. This is our chance to prove that cooperation is possible. Let Danny and me show your fleet how to fight the Devourers. Let us demonstrate that humans and Zelani can work together against a common enemy. Vorthak looked at his daughter, then at the human who had saved her life, then at the artifact that pulsed with dark energy. Everything he had believed about. The universe was crumbling around him, but one thing remained constant: his love for his daughter and his duty to protect his people. Very well, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. Show me how to fight these Devourers. But know this, human. If you betray my trust, if you use this opportunity to harm my people, I will make you wish you had never been born. Danny nodded solemnly. I understand, Your Majesty. But I promise you, the only thing I want is to keep Princess Zara safe and to protect both our species from the darkness that is coming. The alarms continued to wail as the first Devourer ships approached, and King Vorthak prepared to face an enemy he had never imagined in a war he had never wanted to fight. The command center of King Vorthak's flagship buzzed with activity as officers rushed to prepare for the approaching threat. Princess Zara and Danny Walsh stood beside the king, watching the main view screen display the positions of the 3 Devourer ships. The vessels appeared as dark shapes against the starfield, moving with a fluid grace that made them look more like living creatures than machines. They do not look like any ships I have ever seen, Admiral Nexus said, his voice tight with concern. Our sensors are having difficulty getting clear readings on their hulls or weapon systems. Danny stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the display. That is because they are not built the way our ships are built. Devourer vessels are grown rather than constructed. They use organic materials combined with technology we do not understand. They can repair themselves, adapt to new threats, and they feed on energy to become stronger. General Korath scoffed at this explanation. Impossible. No technology can truly be alive. These must be some kind of advanced automation. You will change your mind when you see what they can do, Princess Zara said grimly. Danny and I encountered one of their scout ships 2 days ago. We hit it with everything we had, and it just absorbed our weapons fire and used the energy to grow larger. King Vorthak studied the approaching ships with growing unease. They were still too far away to make out details, but something about their movement patterns felt wrong. They did not fly like ships driven by engines and guided by computers. Instead, they moved like predators stalking their prey, adjusting their course with purpose and intelligence. Show me these weapons, you. Claim can fight them, Vorthak ordered. Danny nodded and activated a device on his armor. A hologram appeared in the center of the command room, displaying the specifications for several weapon designs. The technology looked crude compared to standard Zelani equipment, but there was something about the way it was put together that suggested a deep understanding of energy dynamics. Human scientists have been working on these designs for decades, Danny explained. Standard energy weapons feed the Devourers and make them stronger. But these projectile weapons use kinetic force and explosive chemicals that the Devourers cannot absorb. The key is to overwhelm their adaptive capabilities before they can adjust to the threat. Princess Zara activated her own hologram, showing the modifications that had been made to her armor and weapons. I have been testing hybrid designs that combine Zilani precision with human tactics. The results are promising, but we need your fleet to work with us if we are going to have any chance of success. Admiral Nexus studied the weapon specifications with interest. These designs violate several principles of advanced warfare. They are inefficient, wasteful of materials, and require ammunition that must be physically loaded. Why would anyone choose such primitive technology? Because primitive technology is what works, Danny said firmly. The Devourers have had millions of years to perfect their defenses against energy weapons. But they never encountered a species that still used ballistic projectiles and chemical explosives. That is humanity's advantage. The ships on the view screen were getting closer now, and details were becoming visible. The Devourer vessels looked like they had been carved from black stone and polished to a mirror finish. Their surfaces were covered in organic-looking ridges and grooves that pulsed with a sickly green light. They had no visible engines or weapon ports, but energy readings showed massive power sources hidden within their hulls. All ships, this is the flagship, Admiral Nexus announced over the fleet communication system. Unknown vessels are approaching our position. All crews are to stand ready for combat operations. King Vorthak felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. He had led his people through countless battles, but this felt different. For the first time in his life, he was facing an enemy he did not understand, using tactics he had never tested, with allies he had never trusted. How do we coordinate between human and Zilani forces? He asked. Princess Zara smiled for the first time since her return, and Vorthak saw a glimpse of the confident daughter he remembered. We have been working on that problem. Danny has developed a communication protocol that can link human and Zilani systems. It is not perfect, but it will allow our forces to share targeting data and coordinate attacks. Danny was already connecting devices to the ship's computer systems, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. The key to fighting Devourers is to hit them from multiple angles simultaneously. They can adapt to any single type of attack, but if we overwhelm them with different threats at the same time, we can create windows of vulnerability. The first Devourer ship suddenly accelerated, moving faster than anything its size should have been able to move. It streaked toward the Zilani fleet like a spear thrown by an angry god, its hull beginning to glow with increasing intensity. All ships, open fire, King Vorthak commanded. The Zilani fleet responded instantly. Hundreds of energy weapons lighting up space with beams of concentrated plasma. The blasts struck the Devourer ship and were absorbed into its hull, causing the organic ridges to pulse brighter and the vessel to grow visibly larger. It is feeding on our weapons, Admiral Nexus said in horror. The more we shoot at it, the stronger it becomes. Now watch what happens when we do it right, Princess Zara said. She activated her communication link to Danny's ship, which had launched from the docking bay moments earlier. Danny, execute Pattern Alpha. Danny's voice came through the speakers, calm despite the chaos around him. Pattern Alpha confirmed. All human ships switch to kinetic weapons and target the creatures' nerve centers. 3 human ships that had been hiding in the asteroid field suddenly appeared, their hulls bristling with weapons that looked nothing like standard space combat equipment. They fired salvos of metal projectiles that struck the Devourer ship at precisely calculated points. The creature's glow faltered, and for the first time, it showed signs of damage. The projectiles are disrupting its energy absorption network, Princess Zara explained. Now we can hit it with focused energy blasts while it is vulnerable. The combined assault lasted only seconds, but it was devastatingly effective. The Devourer ship writhed in space like a wounded animal, its organic hull cracking and leaking strange fluids that froze instantly in the vacuum. Then it exploded in a burst of green light that made every sensor on the Zilani fleet scream warnings about radiation exposure. The remaining 2 Devourer ships immediately changed tactics, spreading apart and beginning to circle the fleet like wolves preparing to attack a herd. Their hulls began to shift and change, growing new appendages and weapons that had not been there before. They are adapting to our attack pattern, Danny warned. We need to switch tactics before they figure out how to counter the kinetic weapons. King Vorthak watched the alien ships maneuver with a mixture of fear and fascination. These creatures were unlike any enemy he had ever faced, intelligent and adaptable in ways that challenged everything he knew about warfare, but his daughter and the human had proven that they could be defeated, and that gave him hope. "What do you need from my fleet?" he asked. "We need your ships to act as bait," Princess Zara said. "Draw their attention with energy weapons while the human ships position themselves for kinetic strikes. But this time, we need to hit them with something they have never seen before." Danny was already preparing his next surprise, activating systems on his ship that made the air in the command center tingle with electricity. "Princess Zara and I have been working on a new weapon design that combines the best of both our technologies. It uses Zilani energy focusing systems to accelerate human projectiles to incredible speeds." The second Devourer ship chose that moment to attack, launching itself toward the flagship with horrifying speed. Its hull had grown new weapon ports that began firing beams of energy that ate through Zilani shields like acid through metal. "All power to forward shields," Admiral Nexus shouted. "Return fire with all weapons." The Zilani flagship shuddered under the assault, but the shields held. Energy beams lanced out toward the attacking Devourer, which absorbed them eagerly and grew even larger. Just when it seemed the creature would ram the flagship, Danny's ship appeared directly in its path. "This is for everyone the Devourers have killed," Danny said over the communication system. "And this is for showing me that enemies can become allies." His ship fired a single projectile that glowed with Solani energy, but moved with the solid impact of human kinetic weapons. The hybrid weapon struck the Devourer ship at its center and punched completely through its hull. The creature's death scream echoed across all communication frequencies as it dissolved into component atoms. The third Devourer ship, seeing its companions destroyed, began to retreat toward the edge of the system. But King Vorthak was not about to let it escape. To report on their new tactics. "All ships, pursue and destroy," he ordered. "Let nothing survive to warn the others." As the combined human and Zilani fleet gave chase, Vorthak looked at his daughter and the human who had saved her life. They stood side by side, working together, with an efficiency that spoke of trust built through shared danger. For the first time since this ordeal began, the king allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, his people had found allies who... The third Devourer ship died in a brilliant flash of green light that illuminated the entire fleet. King Vorthak watched from the bridge of his flagship as the creature's remains scattered into space, becoming nothing more than drifting particles that would eventually be pulled into the nearby star. The immediate threat was over, but the victory felt hollow. 3 scout ships had nearly destroyed a significant portion of his fleet, and these were only the advance guard of something much larger and more dangerous. Princes Zara and Danny Walsh returned to the flagship as the fleet regrouped and began damage assessments. The princess looked exhausted but satisfied, while the human carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced death and survived. They made their way to the command center where King Vorthak waited with his senior officers. "The battle is won," Admiral Nexus reported, "but the cost was higher than expected. We lost 6 ships and suffered damage to 12 others. Without the human tactics, we would have lost everything." General Korath stood stiffly beside his king, his face showing the internal struggle he was fighting. For decades, he had trained to fight human forces, believing them to be weak and primitive. Now he had watched those same humans save his fleet from complete destruction. "The enemy fought unlike anything we have encountered before. Our standard tactics were not only useless, but actually helped them become stronger." King Vorthak nodded slowly, his golden eyes fixed on his daughter. "Tell me truthfully, Zara, how many more of these creatures are coming?" Princess Zara exchanged a glance with Danny before answering. "According to human intelligence, the main Devourer fleet consists of thousands of ships. They are currently moving through the Outer Rim territories, consuming everything in their path. If their advance continues at its current pace, they will reach the core worlds within 6 months. The number hit the assembled officers like a physical blow. Thousands of ships, each one potentially as dangerous as the 3 they had just barely defeated. Even with human assistance, the mathematics of such a battle seemed impossible. "We cannot fight that many?" Admiral Nexus said quietly. "Even if we mobilize every ship in the Empire, we do not have the resources to face such a force." Danny stepped forward, his expression serious but not without hope. "That is why we need more than just military cooperation. We need to share technology, combine our research capabilities, and prepare every world in both our territories for what is coming." King Vorthak felt the weight of leadership pressing down on him like never before. Every decision he made now would affect not just his own people, but potentially every living being in the galaxy. The pride and anger that had driven him to plan humanity's destruction seemed petty and foolish in the face of this new reality. "What do you propose?" he asked. Princess Zara activated a holographic display that showed star charts covering both human and Zilani territories. "We propose a full alliance. Human engineers working with Zilani scientists to develop new weapons and defenses. Combined fleets operating under unified command structures. Shared intelligence networks to track devourer movements and coordinate responses." The implications of such an alliance were staggering. It would mean opening Zilani technology to their former enemies, sharing military secrets that had been guarded for centuries, and treating humans as equals rather than conquered subjects. For many in the Empire, such cooperation would be seen as weakness or even treason. "My people will resist this," General Korath said bluntly. "They have lost friends and family members fighting humans. They will not easily accept them as allies." "Then we must make them understand that the alternative is extinction," King Vorthak replied firmly. "If the Devourers succeed in their return, there will be no Zilani Empire, no human colonies, no life of any kind in this galaxy." Danny pulled out another device and activated it, projecting images that made everyone in the room fall silent. The hologram showed worlds that had been consumed by the Devourers, planets stripped of all life and energy until nothing remained but barren rock floating in space. The images were ancient, recovered from archaeological sites, but they showed clearly what happened to civilizations that failed to stop the creatures. "This is what the Devourers do," Danny said, his voice heavy with grim certainty. "They do not conquer or enslave. They consume. They drain the life force from entire worlds to feed their hunger, and when they are finished, nothing remains. No cities, no people, no hope of recovery." Princess Zara added her own knowledge to the explanation. "The humans have been studying Devourer artifacts for generations, trying to understand their weaknesses. They have identified patterns in their behavior, developed countermeasures for their weapons, and created strategies that can work against their adaptive capabilities. But they cannot do it alone." King Vorthak studied the images of dead worlds, imagining his own planets reduced to the same lifeless state. His daughter was right. This was bigger than any territorial dispute or political rivalry. This was about survival itself. What would such an alliance require? He asked. Danny and Princess Zara looked at each other, and the king noticed something pass between them that went beyond mere military cooperation. There was a connection there, an understanding that spoke of shared experiences and mutual respect. Perhaps even something deeper. "It would require trust," Princess Zara said simply. "Trust that we can work together despite our past conflicts. Trust that we share common goals despite our different cultures. And trust that we can build something new together." The princess moved closer to Danny, and the human's protective instincts became even more obvious. King Vorthak realized that his daughter's relationship with this human was more than just military cooperation. They had formed a bond during their time together, a connection that transcended the boundaries between their species. "There's something else you need to know, Father," Princess Zara said, her voice soft but steady. "Danny and I have grown close during these past months. We have learned that the differences between our species are not as important as the things we share. The admission hung in the air like a challenge. King Vorthok felt his old prejudices rising, the instinctive rejection of anything that threatened the purity of his bloodline. But as he looked at his daughter, he saw something he had never seen before. She was happy. Despite everything she had been through, despite the war and the danger and the uncertainty, there was a peace in her eyes that had never been there when she was simply a Zelani princess. "You love him," Vorthok said, the words coming out as a statement rather than a question. "I do," Princess Zara replied without hesitation, "and he loves me. We have faced death together, fought impossible battles side by side, and learned that the strength of two people united is greater than the strength of either one alone." Danny stepped forward, meeting the king's gaze directly. "Your Majesty, I know this is difficult to accept. I know that the idea of your daughter with a human challenges everything you believe about your people's superiority. But I swear to you that I will protect her with my life, and I will serve the alliance between our peoples with every breath in my body." King Vorthok looked at the human who had saved his daughter's life, who had fought beside her against impossible odds, who had helped save his fleet from destruction. Danny Walsh was everything the king had been taught humans were not. He was brave, intelligent, honorable, and completely devoted to Princess Zara's well-being. Slowly, the king stepped forward and placed his hand on Danny's shoulder. The gesture was formal but genuine, a recognition of worth that transcended species boundaries. "If, my daughter chooses you, then you are worthy of that choice," Vorthok said. "And if our peoples are to survive what is coming, then we must learn to see past our old hatreds and build new bonds." He turned to address his officers, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Send word to all ships in the fleet. We are no longer at war with humanity." Effective immediately, human forces are to be treated as allies and given every assistance they require. Any officer who cannot accept this new reality will be relieved of duty. General Korath stepped forward, his expression troubled but determined. "My king, this will not be easy for our people to accept. But if it is your command, then it will be obeyed." Admiral Nexus nodded his agreement. "We will need time to integrate our forces and develop new tactical doctrines. But the alternative is unacceptable." Princess Zara smiled, and for the first time in months, King Vorthok saw his daughter as she truly was. Not just a warrior or a princess, but a bridge between two worlds. A symbol of what their peoples could become if they chose cooperation over conflict. "Then let us begin," she said. "We have 6 months to prepare for the greatest battle our galaxy has ever seen. 6 months to prove that when former enemies unite against a common threat, they can accomplish the impossible." As orders went out across the fleet and preparations began for the larger war to come, King Vorthok stood beside his daughter and the human who had become part of his family. The future was uncertain and filled with danger, but for the first time since this crisis began, he felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. He felt hope.